we established at Tel Aviv University, which actually, actually was the first and the broadest university to establish a brain school. A brain school that the head of the brain school, Professor Uri Asheri, will present the Segol School, and then we'll have 2 lectures, both from researchers at the brain school on real science. One on bats and the other one on Alzheimer's disease. Uri, please.
Thank you, everybody, and really great to see here so many faces, also young faces, and especially this young girl sitting there and had really the passion to ask the question at the right time. So we are really happy to host this event together with the Human Brain Project, and I think it's quite important, and we heard a lot that it's important to outreach the public and to explain. We'll hook another microphone. Hope it will be better now. So we're really happy to host this symposium together with the Human Brain Project. As Mira said, brain science is very interdisciplinary research, and what I mean with that is that you need, in order to understand the brain function, you need people from psychology to understand brain cognition or behavior. You need people from engineering to build brain-machine interface. You need people from medical science and life science to understand mechanism and to find treatment. You need people from linguistics to understand how we form language, and you need people from exact science to understand the brain, the code of the brain. And that's why everything should come together, and Tel Aviv University has established the Segol School of Neuroscience 3 years ago, and the school at the moment allowed the research between 100 research groups which are lying in 7 different faculties, and the school opens new programs both for bachelor degree, for master and PhD. So this is a very exciting area to be and a very exciting place to be, allowing the exchange of ideas and allowing the breakthrough. And I really like the presentation of Or Sagi, and I hope that the next generations are going to come and learn neuroscience. And with that, I would like to introduce the first speaker. We have two talk today, scientific talk from lecturers, from researchers from the Segol School. One is the first one will be Yossi Yovel, who is coming from the Zoology Department, the Life Science Institute, the Life Science Faculty, and the Segol School. And he's going to talk about combinations of behavior, neuroetology, and computational and neuroscience. Yossi, please. אני אחבר את האור, בוא תתחבר.
לא ירדמו הטילים.
אחד זה הטלפון, ואחד זה הקהל שלו שם.
אפשר לעשות בלי זה?
אני חושב שקשה להם לשמוע.
טוב. Okay, so good morning everybody. There is a rule in conferences not to give a talk after somebody who's speaking about a cute animal, and I think that there is a new rule now not to give a talk after Or Sagi. So I'm really happy that you had the break, otherwise I would be competing with something impossible. But anyway, I'm going to talk about bats. I didn't plan to talk about education, but since so many people here talked about education and about museums, I must say something in favor of the new museum that is being built here in Tel Aviv University. If you came from the east, if you came from Beit HaTfutzot gate, from that direction, and if not, you can go there later, you see a huge building that is being built. Probably many of you noticed it, and you're probably wondering what that is. So this is going to be the Steinhart National Museum. The Steinhart National Natural History Museum, in which in which you will be able to see the huge collection of animals that has been in the cellars of Tel Aviv University since, I don't know, since the 20s or something like this. It will be ready in 2 years or something, so you're all invited. Of course, you'll be able to see a lot of bats in that museum, of course, I can assure you. And you will also be able to see bat brains. So what you see over here, so this is a bat face. You'll see a few more in a second. But this is what we call tractography. It was created by Yaniv Asaf, the head of the Department of Neurobiology. And this is a reconstruction of the fibers in a bat's brain. And this is what we can do today thanks to MRI. So together with Yaniv, we are now scanning, we by now scan more than 60 different mammalian brains in order to say something about the evolution of the white matter in the brain, something that is completely unknown. But this is not the topic of my talk today. I just had to say something about it. This is what I'm going to talk about, bats. So why are we interested in the brain of the bat? So bats are mammals. You probably all know this. They're the only mammals that are able to sustain true flight, to flap their wings in order to fly. And what you probably do not know is that bats are an extremely successful group of mammals. Okay, so we have something like 4,000, 5,000 mammalian species on Earth, on the globe, and out of them, between 20 and 25% are mammals, are bats. Sorry. So here are some examples to the diversity of bats. Okay, so I'm just giving examples to things that bats feed on. Here's a bat that can catch fish. Here are bats that catches something like some kind of arthropod. Several bats will drink nectar. Bats that go for vertebrates, such as a frog in this case. There are even 3 species of bats that drink blood. Okay, vampire bats. Don't worry, Central America, not here. But these bats, for instance, possess a very unique sensor, infrared sensing. Okay, in order to find the blood vessels of the animal they want to drink blood from. You know, it's just a bigger mosquito, nothing scary. And you've probably all heard about the iron dome. So here is the iron dome bat. Many bats feed on insects. In this case, it's a huge grasshopper, but bats can go for insects that are as small as mosquitoes sometimes. And I still haven't said anything about their sonar system. In a second, I will talk a lot about their sonar system. But this bat has to find a tiny object, a mosquito, that is moving in a completely what we call an erratic movement. Okay, it's not a predictable movement. It's not something moving straight. And it has to detect this with its biosonar, with its sonar system, which I will elaborate on, and catch it. Okay, so this is exactly the iron dome versus the Qassam, only it is 1,000 times smaller, 1,000 times more sophisticated. So here is the sonar. Okay, so in my lab we are mainly interested in bats' biosonar, or at least that's what I'm going to talk about today. So how does it work? Very briefly, bats emit sound. By the way, I must say bats see. I already told you some of them use infrared. They can smell. They can sense flow of air with special hair cells on their wings. They have all sensory systems that you can imagine, and probably even more in magnetic navigation. But today I want to focus on their sonar system. So as you can see here in the movie, the bat emits sounds. These sounds are usually ultrasonic, so this means that the human ear cannot hear them. They move through the environment just like I am talking right now, and you can hear me. They hit or imping on objects in the environment. The echoes return to the bat's brain. What you see here is a complex signal, okay, 1 and 2, because the bat has 2 ears. Each of these is what we call a superposition, okay? So this can be an echo from a leaf and an echo from a branch, and many echoes that come all together to the bat's ears. And what the bat's brain must do is this. It has to somehow distinguish that this object here is not a leaf, but rather a moth, something that the bat can eat. This is the echo returning from the moth. Okay, how does the bat's brain know that this is an echo of a moth and this is an echo of a leaf? Okay, can you see my cursor? This is the echo of a moth and this is the echo of the leaf. How does the bat brain know this? How does it then fly after this moth in this very dense vegetation? And everything based on sonar. Okay, so if there is no light, the bat can still do this based on sonar. So I often give this talk to crowds of engineering. Just yesterday I talked in the Israeli sonar meeting, and really we are very far from building anything that is even close to this. And this is especially true if you take into account the size of the bats. So many bats are very small animals. This is the smallest mammal on Earth. It's what we call a bumblebee bat. This is an adult. It's not a pup or anything. It weighs 1.5 grams. Its brain weighs, I never weighed its brain, but probably 100 milligrams or something like this. And in addition to using sonar, it can fly, it can remember, it can communicate with other bats, it can use other sensory systems. So far better than anything we can dream of building. So I call this nanotechnology, nanobrains. So, before I go into what Mira called hardcore science, let me just show you a short propaganda movie that will show you some of the things I'm going to talk about in images. So here is a bat that is attacking a moth, maybe a rather easy target. It's a big target. These bats fly very, very fast, 50 kilometers per hour. They must make decisions very, very fast. I talked about this in my scientific talk 2 days ago, how they can translate this sensory input into movement very, very quickly. Here is a bat that is attacking or taking a fish out of the water using sonar. Straight to the mouth. This is a bat that drinks nectar. Interestingly, these flowers want to be pollinated by the bat, so they serve as optimal acoustic reflectors. Okay, they reflect sound. They're like mirrors. They reflect sound really, really strong, and this is in order for the bat to find them. Okay, the flowers perhaps are competing with each other, or the cacti. These are cacti competing with each other in order for the bat to find them and be pollinated. These are bat antennae, ears, which I will talk about soon. Of course, all of them are very, very beautiful. No need to say that. Here is a bat detecting a spider within very, very dense vegetation. The problem I described earlier, not clear how they do it. A classical problem in neuroscience, what we call the cocktail party when we talk about humans, jamming, right? All of the bats are flying together using the same frequencies. How come they're not interfering with each other? And this is just to show you how maneuverable they are. This bat is, look, it is turning on spot. Their flight is very different from bird flight, much more maneuverable, much slower. It is going to attack. This is something we hung for him. This is in the lab, and it is going to attack this prey over there. Okay, so those were some images. Let's talk about some numbers. These are numbers for engineers, so I will not tire you with them, but perhaps I will say I will focus on one number here, and I'll talk about another one later. This is the number up here, which says that bats can measure distance with an accuracy of less than 1 millimeter. Okay, so I didn't say this, but when the bat emits sound, sound moves through the environment, it returns to the bat, right? All of this I explained. But the bat's brain, what it does very, very accurately is to measure time, right? I emit a signal, my brain starts measuring time, the echo comes back, I stop measuring time, and I can multiply time by the speed of sound and estimate the distances of everything in the environment. Okay, so it's something very different from what our brain does. And using this, and in a second I'll tell you a little bit about what we know about the bat's brain, but using this sophisticated biosonar mechanism, bats can measure distance with an accuracy of less than 1 millimeter. Okay, think of yourselves crossing a street, looking at a car coming from the right, using vision and estimating the distance of this car, right? Your error will be on the order of, I don't know, meters, maybe dozens of meters, maybe less if the car is closer. Okay, the bat could do this with an accuracy of less than 1 millimeter. So how do we know these numbers? So here's an example of one type of experiments that we use and other people have used for many years already. This is what we call psychophysics. Okay? We want to see what are the limits of the bat, so we just ask the bat. So what do? We train the bat to distinguish between two stimuli, right, or two signals. So what you will see here, this is what we call a Y platform. And you will see the bat sitting on this edge of the platform. The bat hears one signal from one side, another signal from the other side. I will explain later what it heard. The signals are ultrasonic, so you will not hear them. And the bat has to make a decision. It was trained to detect one of these signals. And this is how I can take the bat to its limits to see what are its limits, what are the limits of its sensory system. So here's the bat. It's now hearing one signal from the right, one from the left. It's crawling to the right because it thinks that's the right decision. And it is now excited because it is going to get a reward. A worm. It's very easy to train these bats. If a human, it would be more difficult and unethical probably. So we can do this to ask many questions. Okay, I just wanted to show you the concept. This is how people measure this 1 millimeter accuracy. Okay, they train the bat to crawl. There are two objects, and they train the bat to crawl to the closer of the two objects. And then they bring the two objects very, very close to each other and see when the bat is not able to distinguish the two anymore. And this was less than 1 millimeter, just, hand waving. What we did here is a different experiment. I showed you previously that many bats can fly together, and we're interested in how come they don't interfere with each other. So what we did here is to train one bat to recognize the calls, the signals of another bat. We wanted to see if they can differ. It's as if now I'm speaking and you can recognize my voice, only that in bats it's much more difficult because the signals are very, very short. They're adapted for sonar. They're not communication. Bats also have communication calls. Okay, they can also, when you hear the fruit bats, you know, the people who are from Israel at least know them from Tel Aviv, right? They fly, or from the cities, they fly above you, they shit on your cars, whatever. Sorry for my language. So you constantly hear them talking to each other, right? Some stuff like that. That's not sonar, that's communication, a whole other field that we're also interested in, but I will not talk about today. So what we did here is to show that one individual bat can recognize the voices of other bats, and this is perhaps part of the way for them to cope with this jamming problem, with flying together without interfering with each other. Okay, perhaps the biggest difference, if I try to generalize, between bat sensory, this biosonar sensory system, and all the sensory systems that we know as humans, vision, olfaction, whatever, is its flexibility. So because bats emit sound, they can change a lot of parameters of this sound and change the way they perceive their environment. It's as if you would use binoculars, for instance, to zoom in or something like this. So one of the things the bats can do is change their temporal resolution. How fast do they update what they know about the world? Okay? So this is an example of what you see here. What you see here is what we call a spectrogram. There is frequency and there is time. Not so important, but each of these black lines is a call. One sonar call emitted by a bat. And this is a bat that is attacking prey. And what you can see is that, look at the repetition rate, at the intervals between the calls. They are becoming shorter and shorter and shorter all the time. So the bat starts with a very low update rate. It acquires information about the environment once every second, more or less, which is much less than what we do. Try to ride your bicycle, close your eyes, and once a second, open your eyes. I sometimes try to do that to try to feel how a bat feels. And then at the end, so this is much slower than a human, okay? We update visual information 25 times a second, right, at least. And here at the end, when the bat is already very, very close to attacking this moth, you see that it is updating sensory information 200 times per second, okay? 200 times faster than what it did before, and much, 10 times faster than what we can do. So if you want, it's moving from slow motion to high-speed video imaging or something like that. So that's one example for how bats can constantly adjust the sensory input that they are receiving. Here's another example. This has to do with the ears. Okay, so you know our ears, we're very good in localizing sound. If I close my eyes now and somebody talks, I will know quite accurately where it is in the room. But still, our ears are stationary, right? We cannot move our ears. This is what bats do. Look what happens when this is a bat that in our lab. We nicely restrain it within some sponge so it cannot fly around. Can you see this? Or should I turn off more lights, perhaps? The medium, the middle. Yeah, that should be it. No, sorry. Yeah, can you see this better? And we are moving something towards the bat just to get it interested, to echolocate, to use its sonar, and look what's going on with its ears. By the way, what we are moving is an angry bird, for those of you who notice. And look what it is doing with its ears, okay? So I'm not going to give you answers. These are questions. This is something that is interesting for us. Definitely this has to do with better sound localization. So what engineers do, yesterday I was in the sonar conference, is instead of putting 2 microphones, they will put 1,000 microphones, right? I will use an array of microphones, or sensors or receivers or whatever. You know, evolution pushed 2 sensors. So instead of using 1,000 sensors, I have 2 sensors, but my antennae are moving very sophisticatedly to allow better sound localization, to tell where the sound is coming from. And this also, of course, has to do with this problem of many, many bats flying together or sitting together in their colony and interacting with each other. Here are some examples of other beautiful bats. And this is to show you how diverse they are. Okay, I argue that they are diverse in their behavior, but look how diverse they are in their morphology. So look at the ears of this bat. By the way, look at the eyes. This bat has very big eyes. This bat flies very, very fast. It's, again, a bat you can find in Israel. It's called a shaf in Hebrew. And it flies very, very fast. And maybe these ears have to do with dealing with wind, with noise that is generated by the wind. We don't know, just an hypothesis. Look at this bat. Look at the ears of this bat. Look at the face of this bat. Okay, so everything on the face of this bat has to do with sound emission. This bat emits sound through the nostrils, through the nose. And just like, you know, these flashlights that you can turn and focus the beam and widen the beam, so we believe that the bats are doing something similar with everything that has that is on their face. It has to do with sonar emission, but really nothing is known about these questions. So if somebody is looking for new questions in neuroscience, here they are. I want to say a word about the bat's brain. I will not even give an overview, really one word about something unique that we know about the bat's brain. And this is what we call delay-tuned neurons. So already in the 70s, people, by recording bat brains, people realized that they have special neurons that do not exist in, at least we don't know, they exist in the brains of other mammals or other animals. And these neurons measure distance. Okay, so a neuron, there is a specific neuron, not one of course, many, that will fire, that will create an action potential, that will respond when an echo returns from 1 meter. And there is another neuron or a group of neurons that will fire when an echo returns after 1.1 meters, and so on and so forth. And this is how the bat's brain can encode distance. And of course, it is very interesting to wonder, do we have such neurons, or how good are our neurons in similar tasks? Maybe you've seen people who use sonar, right? Blind people who walk around and use sonar. If you haven't, you can Google Daniel Kish and you will see a human being, a blind human being who walks around and emits signals like this and uses sonar. So it would be interesting to know what's going on in his brain and how far can his brain take this sonar. So in order to study this is completely new. I have not shown it yet to anybody. This is a study that we just started performing. What you see here is a rat, not a bat. And by the way, bats and rats are not very close to each other. And you see what this rat has on its head? That's a sonar system. So it's a miniature 3-gram sonar system. You see the speaker. Maybe you can see that. Just disappeared. Let me show it again. It's a 3-gram. 1 second. Here it is. This is the speaker, this silver thing here on top. And this bat is being trained from very, very young age, from 10 days actually, to navigate through a maze in complete darkness using sonar. Okay? And of course, we are very much interested, and again, together with Yaniv Asaf, who is an expert on MRI, we will try to understand, first of all, behaviorally, what can this rat do with sonar, and then, of course, what is going on in its brain. The other animal, another special animal you will see in this talk, and then I'll go back to bats until the end. We talk about sophisticated brains all the time. We talked about humans. We talked about bats, rats. Let's give some respect to insects. They also have brains, and they're also quite amazing with what they can do with their very, very simple brains. What you see here is a moth, and in a second I will show you a movie in which this bat over here will attack the moth. You will hear the calls of the bat. You will hear something like choop, choop. It's lower than frequency, so you can hear it. And what this moth will do is quite amazing. This has been shown 2 years ago. This moth is going to generate a high-frequency signal in order to jam the bat. Okay, what we call electronic warfare, or לוחמה אלקטרונית in Hebrew. Okay, so the moth developed the ability first to detect the bat with ultrasound, which is not easy, and then to emit a signal. You'll hear this zzz, some buzz like this. So electronic warfare. You hear this in the background, it's and you will see what happens to the bat. Okay, so this is perhaps for the insect brain project in a few years. So, you know, there are many, many brains out there, and even the simple ones can do very, very sophisticated things. Okay, so now I want to talk. I gave you some overview about bat sonar, and now I want to show you a few of the applications that we think of. So one of the main applications that we're interested in have to do with robotics. I collaborate a lot with the School of Mechanical Engineering, Professor Gabor Kosha. And our aim basically is a robot that navigates like a bat. So what you see here is a kind of a robot that has 2 bat ears, and here is its bat mouth. And we want to develop algorithms for this robot to move around the environment, to be like a bat, basically. Here you can see an ear, the robotic arm, and an ear, a bat ear. It's not a real ear, it's a 3D print. And it is scanning the environment, well, not like the bat does. You've seen the bat before, but similarly to what the bat is doing. And one of the things, so here is again this robotic arm, a little bit bigger with a bat mouth and 2 bat ears. And here is the wild version of this bat. Okay, so this is the wild bat we can take out to the field. It weighs a little bit more than 1.5 grams. It cannot fly, and it has a car battery to allow it to operate. So so you know, with robotics, there are a lot of things you want to do, but one of the tasks you are interested in, and one of the most difficult tasks is to recognize, to see what is in front of you. And in this case, we want to use sonar, not vision. Many people use cameras. We want to have a robot that has cameras, but also can use sonar. So here is an example for how we do it. We can take our bat, our wild bat, into the field. We can emit sounds and record the echoes of plants, for instance. Here is a case in which we show, I show you echoes of plants. Once again, this is a spectrogram, frequency over time, and each of these is an echo, a single echo of a plant. Okay? So I want to play back the echo of an apple tree to you. This is what an apple tree sounds like. It's a very loud apple tree. And of course, we lower the frequency for you to hear it. You probably could not detect the apples, but I will now play a cornfield, and I suspect that you will be able to detect the corn. Okay, so without going into the details, we have a whole algorithm that tries to classify this stuff and succeeds. I will just show you a very clear difference. Okay, look at corn over here. Okay, and look at apple over here. And there are a few in the middle. What is very, very clear to all of you probably is this very different structure that you see in corn. Right? This structure in corn is the rows of corn. Okay, the rows of corn in the field. And listen to it, and you can hear these rows of corn. All right, choo, choo, choo. This is just an easy example for how you can take these very, very complex echoes and then tell the robot, or the robot will know what is in front of it, and should it go through, should it go around, should it, I don't know, should it pick the peppers. We're now working in collaboration with Vulcanic on an automatic pepper detector, so it knows if there are peppers in the greenhouse, and it will then maybe also pick them automatically. And this is, of course, where we want to go. Our bat-like drone, we're just working on the engine at the moment, so we're not there yet. But instead of having this camera, this bat drone will have a sonar, of course, and we'll be able to do stuff from the air, hopefully. The last thing I want to say in 2 last minutes is I'm leaving robotics and going back to the bats and back to the field, and I want to tell you about how we study bats in the field very, very briefly. We are really interested in bats in the field. We want to know what they do, not in the lab, but what they do somewhere above the Lake of Galilee or whatever. What you see here is a super bat, okay? It is carrying our sensor. It has a camera on it. It has an accelerator. Don't worry, all of this weighs less than 10 grams, less than 5% of the bat. So very, very, it's like I would give you, I don't know, a bottle of water to carry. And it carries an accelerometer. It carries an ultrasonic microphone. It carries GPS. And perhaps in the future also an ability to record brain activity. And this is what it looks like from the bat's point of view. So this is a fruit bat. Okay, and I didn't say I put this thing on the bat. The bats can fly wherever they want. They do their behavior, and then I find these devices when they fall off the bats, and we look at the data. So here is a fruit bat flying from its roost in the Judean mountains towards its tree, maybe perhaps in your backyard. 25 kilometers. Notice how straight its navigation is. And this navigation is not based on sonar. Okay? Everything I said about until now is not relevant for this. This is long-range navigation. You cannot use sonar for such long ranges. This is based on vision or magnetic sensing or whatever. We don't know. We're just impressed by how straight it is. And this is a fruit bat that you all know. But what I want to show you, while sitting here, I thought maybe I will show you this. Again, first time I show it in a conference. This is from last month. This is Mexico. Okay, let me zoom out so I orient you in the world. This is the Sea of Cortez, Baja California, for those of you who know, and Mexico here on the right. Okay, and what we studied here, I'll zoom in, is a bat, a special bat. This is the only place in the world where you can find this bat. It's an island, a 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer island in the Sea of Cortez. This is real sea. It's not Mediterranean. You have whales in the sea, and on this island there are 500,000 terns that roost. And this bat, nobody knew what this bat does on this island except for the fact that it is there, and it eats fish. We know from its feces that it eats fish. And we put GPS for the first time on this bat, and now we see what they do. These are 4 nights of the same bat. You see that this bat flies 30 kilometers offshore, usually to the same areas, and we know from its recordings, because we recorded sound, we know that it's hunting for fish over here. Still, this is very, very preliminary. I cannot tell you how it finds the fish in a wavy ocean. It's completely unclear. I cannot tell you in complete darkness how does it return to the island, what sensory input can it use to navigate back. But these are the things that we are very much interested in. So that's it. I want to thank students and collaborators and funding agencies, and unless you have questions, I'm finished. יש לנו זמן שאלות?
Yeah, there are some.
We have time for
We
questions.
have time for a few questions.
There's
You showed that, you didn't have to tell, but it was in the slideshow that you can recognize objects that are smaller than the wavelength.
yeah. It was written. Okay. I want to say that was really sharp observation, but it was written. Yeah. Is it phase recognition? Okay, so the question was, so it was written on one of the slides that bats can detect objects that are smaller than the wavelength, which is something theoretically almost impossible according to the rules of physics. And the question is, are they sensitive to phase? It's a very technical question, so I'll give you a short answer and we can talk later. The second part, I think the answer is no. As much as we know, no, they're not sensitive to phase, just like their auditory system is similar to yours and mine, except that it can operate in higher frequencies. And it is a riddle how they do so, how they do this. One partial explanation is that even though the object is smaller than the wavelength, you do get some echo back. Okay, we tend to think that nothing returns, but there is something that returns. And moreover, probably they integrate over many calls, and perhaps they use something else that we do not know. There was, yeah.
I was wondering, on a time scale, what do you think, in how much time can you get to understand something else, or
How much time will it take us to understand?
yeah, or to get like to your drones, or to make the robot work? Or
All I need is a bat brain project, $1 billion in 2 days. So the question was how much time? Wow, it's a good question. I'm new. I'm here since 2 years. I have at least 40 years in front of me. I don't know. We think, I mean, of course, when I talk in a conference like this, I talk about long-term goals. But on the other hand, you know, this took us a year to get this data. This is the bat flying above the Lake of Galilee. This is not it. By the way, when I was a student, I did a lot of work at Danny's lab, who will talk later, and I owe him a lot for being here today. But back to the question, so I didn't think we will do this in a year. Tracking a bat above the Sea of Cortez and saying what it does, and many, you know, these are the smallest GPS in the world. They were developed by engineers for the lab. We didn't think that, I hoped that, I didn't think it would be so fast. So, I don't know. Yeah. Like I answered you last time, I asked me in 40 years, right? I think it was you. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So it's a good question. Where are the neural correlates? At the moment, so my personal view is that there is so much complexity in behavior that we don't know that I leave the electrophysiology for later. We're doing fMRI, which is not flying bats, obviously. We're trying to start looking at neural correlates in the level of EEG. But at the moment we are focusing on behavior. There is Nachum Ulanovsky, if you know, in Weizmann Institute, who is doing neural recordings on flying bats in the lab, not outside, of course. But it's the first time ever that anybody does this. There is a big gap. If you are personally interested, there is a big gap in neurophysiology in bats. In the 70s, there was Suga, a very famous researcher who did a lot. He found these delayed neurons, did a lot of work. A lot of his students then became scientists in many institutes working on auditory systems, but most of them moved to rats or cats or whatever, unfortunately. So there is a huge gap that is really, we're providing this sophisticated behavior, and somebody needs to come and do the electrophysiology. And it is possible. Yeah.
Is there any chance of putting, or do you measure altitude as well? Like, say, passage through the Sea of Cortez, you could get some information on how the animal is hunting through a rough sea.
Yeah.
With measurement of altitude.
Yeah. So the question was, how good are we with measuring altitude, and can we say something? Using this information, can we say something about the bat's behavior? So the measurements of altitude with GPS are not as bad as people tend to think. Our accuracy is, we estimate it to be something like 10 to 20 meters. So if the bat's behavior is, within 1 to 2 meters, I of course cannot measure it, but the bats that hunt above the Lake of Galilee, we've seen them going from 0 to 1,000 meters. So obviously, if I'm measuring 1,000 plus minus 10, I know that the bat is doing this. And this is the first time that anybody measures the altitude of bats foraging or searching for food. And of course, we're very much interested in understanding what's going up at 1,000 meters. So we're now we hope to collaborate with the expert on radar-based monitoring of insects. There is a guy in the UK, and they put this radar, and they can monitor insects movement up to 1,000 or even more, I think, up to 7,000 meters to try to somehow understand what's going on. Regarding the Sea of Cortez, I can tell you that the bats are flying at sea level, like maybe plus minus 5 meters. So it doesn't help me at the moment to understand how do they find fish. It does give me, for instance, it makes the mystery even bigger, because if these bats were going high, they would probably be, I could suggest that maybe they're looking in order to find the island on the way back. But they're really flying at the level of the sea, which makes this sensory, maybe it's spatial memory or something like this. It makes it more mysterious. What we want to do, this was last month, so we don't, we came, we didn't know what to expect. What we want to do is go back next year with a boat, with the drone perhaps. We can try to record them from above. I don't know.
How big a group are they when they go?
Yeah, so this, the question was how big is the group of bats, and it really depends on the species. I didn't say this when I presented bats, but you can find anything in bats. More than 1,000 species. There are individuals, or there are species, sorry, that forage as individuals, completely alone. And there are bats that swarm, that fly in swarms of hundreds to thousands. And we actually were able to show that at least one species of bat, they keep together. They stay always within 100 meters from another bat. We think they're doing something collectively, searching for food collectively. Okay, thank you.